In the summer of 1590, an Englishman returned to an island off the coast of North America after being away for nearly 3 years. He had come back expecting to find his family and the settlers he had left behind. Instead, he found an abandoned settlement. No people. No bodies. No obvious signs of battle. Only empty buildings and a mysterious word carved into a tree. That word was Croatoan. More than 4 centuries later, historians still debate what happened to the people of Roanoke. This is the story of the lost colony. Welcome to History Uncovered. The beginning of Roanoke. The story begins in the late 16th century. England was competing with other European powers for influence in the New World. English leaders wanted permanent settlements in North America. In 1587, a group of English colonists traveled across the Atlantic under the leadership of John White. Their destination was Roanoke Island, located along the coast of what is now North Carolina. The expedition included men, women, and children. Unlike earlier attempts, this was intended to become a permanent community. The settlers brought supplies, tools, and hopes for a new beginning. Among them was John White's daughter, Eleanor Dare. She was pregnant when the colonists arrived. Soon after the settlement was established, she gave birth to a daughter. Her name was Virginia Dare. Virginia became famous in history because she is generally recognized as the first child of English parents born in the English colony of North America. But her future would become part of one of America's greatest mysteries. The colony's problem. Life at Roanoke was difficult from the beginning. The settlers were far from England. Supplies were limited. They depended heavily on the environment around them and on relationships with nearby indigenous communities. The colonists also faced the challenge of building a functioning settlement in unfamiliar territory. John White eventually made a difficult decision. He would return to England to obtain additional supplies. He intended to come back as quickly as possible. But history had other plans. The return that never came. John White sailed back to England in 1587. He expected his absence to be temporary. Instead, England became involved in a major crisis. The Spanish Armada threatened England in 1588. Ships and resources were urgently needed for the conflict. England's attention turned toward war. White's return voyage to Roanoke was delayed. He could not immediately obtain the ships and supplies he needed. Months became years. The colonists at Roanoke were waiting. But the rescue expedition did not arrive. The mysterious delay. Imagine being one of those settlers. You are living thousands of kilometers from home. Your food supplies are becoming uncertain. You have no idea when help will arrive. And the person who promised to return has disappeared for years. The situation must have been extremely difficult. Meanwhile, John White continued trying to return. Eventually, in 1590, he finally sailed back toward Roanoke. He was desperate to find his family. But when the expedition arrived, something was terribly wrong. The empty settlement. John White and his companions reached Roanoke Island. They expected to hear voices. They expected to see people. Instead, the settlement was abandoned. The houses were empty. The colonists were gone. There were no obvious signs of a battle. There was no mass grave. There was no clear explanation. White searched for clues. Then he discovered something extraordinary. Before leaving England, he had instructed the colonists to carve a sign into a tree if they were forced to move. The sign they found was Croatoan. The word immediately attracted attention. Croatoan referred to a nearby island and was also associated with an indigenous community in the region. Could the colonists have moved there? There was another detail. A cross was reportedly expected if the settlers had been forced to leave because of danger. White did not find the cross he was looking for. That made the mystery even deeper. What happened to the colonists? There was no simple answer. One possibility was that the colonists had moved voluntarily. Roanoke may not have provided enough food or security. The settlers may have decided to move closer to another community. Croatoan was a logical possibility. Another theory suggests that the colonists may have divided into smaller groups. Some could have moved toward the mainland. Others may have joined indigenous communities. Over time, these groups could have become integrated into local societies. But without written records, proving exactly what happened is extremely difficult. The Croatoan clue. The word Croatoan became the most famous clue in the entire mystery. For centuries, people have treated it almost like a message saying, "We went to Croatoan." But historians have to be careful. The word does not prove exactly where every colonist went. It does, however, show that the settlers had knowledge of the Croatoan people and location. It is entirely possible that the colonists intended to leave a clue about their destination. But the evidence does not tell us what happened after that. Did they reach Croatoan? Did they die along the way? Did they join another community? Or did different groups follow different paths? The search for answers. Over the centuries, many theories developed. Some stories claimed the colonists had been killed. Others suggested they had disappeared into the surrounding wilderness. Some believed they had been absorbed into indigenous communities. Researchers have searched archaeological sites, historical documents, and indigenous oral traditions for evidence. Archaeology has become especially important. Instead of relying only on the mysterious story, researchers have looked for physical evidence of where the colonists may have gone. Artifacts such as European pottery and other objects can provide clues about contact between English settlers and indigenous communities. But no single discovery has definitively solved the mystery. The Lost Colony legend. As generations passed, Roanoke became more than a historical event. It became a legend. The phrase "lost colony" captured the imagination of writers, historians, and the public. The idea of an entire settlement disappearing without a trace was irresistible. But the real history may have been much less dramatic. The colonists may not have simply vanished. They may have moved. They may have adapted. They may have joined other communities. Some may have died from disease, starvation, or conflict. Others may have survived. The problem is that the evidence is incomplete. And when evidence disappears, legends often fill the gaps. The role of indigenous communities. One important part of the story is often overlooked. The Roanoke colonists did not live in an empty world. The region was already home to indigenous peoples with established communities, cultures, and political relationships. European settlers entered an existing landscape. Their survival depended partly on their relationships with the people who already lived there. This makes the possibility of integration especially important. If some colonists joined indigenous communities, they may have gradually disappeared as a distinct English settlement. Their descendants could have become part of local populations. That would explain why an abandoned Roanoke settlement could exist without leaving behind a large group of identifiable survivors. But again, this remains a hypothesis rather than a proven final answer. The archaeological mystery. Modern archaeology has continued to investigate the area. Researchers have searched not only Roanoke Island, but also nearby regions. Some archaeological discoveries have suggested that European objects appeared in places connected to indigenous settlements. These findings demonstrate contact. But contact does not automatically prove that the missing colonists settled there. This is why the mystery survives. There are clues. There are possibilities. But there is no final document explaining the fate of everyone at Roanoke. The most haunting possibility, perhaps the most fascinating possibility, is that the colonists did survive. Imagine that instead of disappearing, they slowly became part of another community. Their English identities may have faded over generations. Their children may have grown up speaking different languages. Their homes may have disappeared. Their names may have been forgotten. And eventually, the original colony became nothing more than an abandoned settlement. If that happened, the people of Roanoke did not vanish in a single night. They disappeared from history gradually. That possibility is far more complicated than the legend, and perhaps more believable. What we know. We know that the Roanoke colony was established in 1587. We know that John White left the settlement to obtain supplies. We know that his return was delayed for years. We know that he returned in 1590. And we know that the settlement was empty. We know that the word Croatoan was found carved at the site. But beyond these facts, certainty becomes difficult. We do not know exactly where every colonist went. We do not know how many survived. We do not know whether they all moved together. And we do not know their final fate. The mystery that survived. More than 400 years later, the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of America's most famous historical mysteries. But perhaps the real lesson is not simply that people disappeared. It is that history can lose people surprisingly easily. A settlement can vanish. Buildings can collapse. Records can be destroyed. Names can disappear. And eventually, all that remains may be a single word carved into wood. Croatoan. A clue. A possibility. And an unanswered question. Final conclusion. The people of Roanoke came to North America hoping to build a permanent English settlement. They faced an unfamiliar environment, limited supplies, and an uncertain future. John White left them in 1587, expecting to return. When he finally came back 3 years later, his family and the other settlers were gone. The settlement stood empty. And the only major clue was a mysterious word carved into a tree. Croatoan. Perhaps the colonists moved. Perhaps they joined indigenous communities. Perhaps disease, starvation, or conflict destroyed the settlement. Perhaps different groups experienced different fates. We simply do not have enough evidence to say with certainty. And that is why the mystery has survived for more than 4 centuries. The lost colony of Roanoke reminds us that history is not always a complete story. Sometimes we are left with fragments, an abandoned settlement, a forgotten community, and one mysterious word. Croatoan. Maybe one day archaeology will reveal the missing chapter. Until then, the fate of Roanoke remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. This is History Uncovered. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep uncovering history. Subscribe my channel.